Professor Wilkins, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to be with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Well, let's start off with a statement that you made while speaking to an international audience of lawyers and legal professionals in Paris. I believe it was December of 2011. And here's what you said, and I quote, "We should all be reminded that people around the world yearn for the goods that only the rule of law can provide, a freedom of democracy, of expression, of legitimate protest. These are the goods to which every person in this room has dedicated their professional lives," end of quote. And that's a profound statement. So what I want to ask you is if you would give us your perspective regarding the effects of the globalization of the legal profession on law firms.
Well, I made that statement to a group called the World Justice Forum, which you may know is an organization of both lawyers and other professionals really dedicated to spreading the law around the world. And my talk was really about the importance of globalization, and in particular the globalization of what you might think of as the corporate sector for that project. And that's really just one of the ways in which globalization is changing law firms. It's changing really the whole market for legal services, which of course used to be maybe the most local market in the world, in which lawyers not only just practice law nationally, but oftentimes subnationally, and were licensed, to only practice law in a state or in a jurisdiction. And their clients were in that jurisdiction, and the kind of law that they practiced, the substantive law, only came from that jurisdiction. Now all of those things have changed dramatically, and as a result, we've seen law firms grow, at least all of them grow, but many of them grow into very significant global players. And equally important, we've seen the emergence of important law firms in places in the world where they never used to exist before, like India or China or Brazil or South Africa or the other important emerging economies of the world. So the globalization is really transforming everything about lawyers and particularly about law firms, and it's changing then what those law firms do and what we can hope and expect them to do.
Now, in that same presentation, you said, and I quote again, large corporate clients have been voicing increasingly loudly that the lawyers that serve them don't understand their business or the services are too expensive. So they are, and I think this is actually your terminology, unbundling them and parceling them out to different providers around the world. Can you talk a little bit about that unbundling and how that is affecting the legal profession?
It used to be that when a client came to a law firm, they gave that law firm the entire matter, and it was up to the law firm to decide really how to understand what the nature of the problem was, and then how to address that problem and what kinds of services the client needs. Today, those initial decisions are increasingly being made inside the client, particularly by general counsels who are increasingly sophisticated around the world. And much of what they're deciding is that instead of giving the whole problem to one law firm, that they're going to take that problem apart and perhaps say, look, the document or discovery work, that can be done more efficiently not by a law firm in the United States, but by a legal process outsourcing organization in India, for example. Or that some of this problem involves specialized expertise, and for that we're going to go to a boutique firm. Or perhaps that some of it involves expertise that isn't really best done by a law firm, so we might go to another kind of professional service firm. And then we might bring in yet another law firm to do, to kind of do some of the high-level work that the project requires. So they're taking things that used to come all packaged together by the law firm and instead deciding how to break the matter apart and array it along an increasingly global service chain. The example I always give that is happening to law, but it's happened to many other kinds of products and services, and I always give the example of how I used to buy music when I was a kid versus how kids today buy music. We used to buy music by going to a record store, and we could only buy what was in the record store, and we could only buy it the way the record company sold it, which was, a beautiful long-playing album with 15 songs on it. And we were doing it because all we really wanted was the one song that was being played on the radio. Now, today, when kids buy music, they go straight to iTunes and buy the one song they want, or maybe they rent the song they want. And then they construct their own playlists and they share it. It's that kind of taking things that were all packaged together, unbundling them and repackaging them that's happening in law.
Let me do a follow-up question on that, if I could. Talk a little bit about the Internet, because in my preparation I was fascinated by what you had to say about portals such as LegalZoom and your comparison to WebMD, which has also changed the medical industry.
So if you think about what law is, at some fundamental respect, it's information. And what's happened is that the Internet is democratizing information. It's making information much more readily available. And we can see this in, almost every industry. Again, my example of buying music, the iTunes is an Internet portal, but you can look at lots of other ways in which we get information that we used to have to go to a third-party intermediary for. Take the way you probably booked your last airline flight. You used to have to go to a travel agent or call up the airline. Now there's information available to you in many websites at your fingertips about every flight and every price of every flight. And that has fundamentally transformed the way in which we travel and has pretty much almost eliminated the travel agent business. These sorts of things are happening in the world of legal services, and LegalZoom is an example that you might think of in the consumer marketplace. But I think we're going to see more and more sophisticated information, resource, and sharing portals that are directed at corporate clients. And there are many consultants and providers who are trying to put together information about law firms, about legal resources, about legal developments in ways that clients can access through the Internet, which will then reduce, although of course it won't eliminate, but reduce their need to call their lawyer to find out that information.
David, you also talked about what you called the greatest single resource that we have, and that being independent professional judgment. What are your thoughts as to what that looks like in a modern and global society?
Well, it really is changing, and this is one of the challenges for lawyers and also, frankly, for legal education, where I spend my time. We used to think very confidently that we knew what it meant to, quote, think like a lawyer and what legal judgment was. And it was mostly around understanding legal cases and statutes and other traditional legal materials. But today, we have to be much broader in the way in which we think about legal problems, because from the perspective of our clients, they're not legal problems, they're problems. And those problems are at the intersection often of law and strategy and finance and politics and morality. And so we need to understand legal judgment as also being influenced and incorporating these different fields. We see in, again, every area of society, we see more and more of a blurring together, if you will, of traditional boundaries. We used to think of law as being very distinct from things like politics or business or economics. And now we understand that these things really are closely connected, and particularly in a practical way for our clients. And so legal judgment has to incorporate this new way of thinking, and yet it still has to be independent, because that is the great value that lawyers bring. They're not just the agents of their clients. They're also the guardians of our legal system. They're the ones who are not only supposed to help facilitate what clients do, but sometimes to tell clients that they can't do things that they might want to do. And so this balance between understanding the world in the way in which our clients understand it as deeply connected to their broader business objectives, and yet staying sufficiently independent so that we can play the role that lawyers are supposed to play as those who protect our most important legal ideals, is increasingly complicated in this new global world, but it's one that we are going to have to learn how to navigate.
That's very interesting. And again, last night when I was just preparing a little bit, you talked about the inherent conflict that a lawyer has to face on a daily basis and how difficult that is.
That is very true. I think it's why being a lawyer is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most rewarding jobs, because the lawyer really stands in the balance between facilitating the client objectives, which is crucially important, and clients are more and more capable of knowing what their objectives are. That was what we talked about a little bit ago. Mm-hmm. But also to be the person who protects those legal ideals that you quoted me as saying right at the beginning of the talk. So it's a very complex job, but a crucial one.
We talked about the effects of globalization of the legal profession on law firms, but as a follow-up to that, can you give us your thoughts as to how globalization and the unbundling of legal services is impacting the role of legal marketing professionals, and then also how you feel it might continue to change in the future?
All the changes we've been talking about are making the role of legal marketing professionals even more important than they have been. And they have been very important for now many years. And this is why I had the great privilege of speaking to the Legal Marketing Association. And, there were 1,200 people in the room. If we'd gone back 20 years ago, maybe there would have been 100 people in the room. I mean, all law firms realize that they need the help of legal marketing professionals. Unfortunately, not all law firms have learned just how crucial this role is and how to best incorporate the work of these terrific professionals. So why do I say it's more important now than ever? Well, the market has become so much more complicated. As I say, it's not just a local or even a national market, it's a global market. Law firms are not just competing against law firms in their own jurisdiction or even other law firms. They're also competing against other kinds of professional service organizations, from legal process outsourcing to technology companies to multidisciplinary professional service firms, like what we used to call the accounting firms, which have not been accounting firms for a very long time and which have been quite aggressive and effective in trying to incorporate law into the services they provide to clients, to competing with in-house legal, with their own clients about what should be insourced, if you will, and what should be outsourced to law firms. All of that has made the marketplace infinitely more complicated. But it's even more than that. I think if we just think of legal marketing professionals as people who help lawyers market what they already do to clients, we will be missing a crucial role that these professionals can play in making law firms more efficient. Legal marketing professionals, precisely because they have training in marketing and in business, can help law firms to understand what services they should be delivering and how to deliver those services more effectively. If what I said before is right, that the kind of knowledge that it takes to have truly independent and effective professional judgment in today's world is inherently multidisciplinary and at the intersection of law and business and strategy, then legal marketing professionals are uniquely positioned to help lawyers understand that intersection and therefore to help us to understand the kinds of services that the clients need and to deliver them in the way the clients need them.
I'm so glad you talked about this. I agree. What I see is that the role of the legal marketing professional is becoming increasingly important. I also would like to ask you about the program that you teach, the program on the legal profession at Harvard Law School. And by the way, I had just read the interview. You were interviewed by the New York Times last month, and that article really identified some very concerning issues regarding the legal profession here in the United States.
Well, this is really a crucial and difficult time for the legal profession in the United States, because the legal profession has finally been affected by many of the broad-scale trends that have been reshaping really the entire American economy now for several years, and we've really touched on almost all of them. Globalization, obviously, being one, the information technology revolution being another, and the third being this kind of blurring of these traditional categories. All of that is now really putting pressure on the traditional model of the delivery of legal services here in the United States, but frankly around the world as well. The program on the legal profession is designed to really try to help understand these changes and to develop collaborative new ways of teaching law students, but also connecting with the legal profession. Because, unfortunately, in the last several years, the legal academy, if you will, and the legal profession have kind of drifted far apart. And that's, I think, unfortunate for both sides. And given the challenges that we now see, we need each other more than ever. So the program on the legal profession conducts world-class empirical research on the changes that are happening in the legal profession and in legal education in the United States and around the world. So we have projects, for example, on how large companies purchase legal services, on the new legal careers that lawyers are leading in the 21st century. We have projects specifically around globalization and the emergence of important legal professions in emerging economies. We call our project Globalization, Lawyers in Emerging Economies, or GLEE, like the popular TV show. Mm-hmm. That's our attempt to do a little marketing. And where we're looking at everything from how legal education and legal practice and clients and cross-border mergers and acquisitions in places like India, China, Brazil, and probably very soon in South Africa or other places in Africa. We're looking at mentoring and development and professional development in the legal profession. So we do really world-class research on the real issues that we think are affecting the profession. And then we try to take that research and develop innovative new ways of teaching both law students and professionals. So we've created some new courses in Harvard Law School. I teach a course with Ben Heineman from General Electric on challenges of a general counsel, trying to get students to understand what that role is about, which is so crucial, but there's almost no information in law schools. We teach courses around the changing nature of legal education in the 21st century. I teach classes about globalization. But then we also have established a very vibrant executive education program in which we teach courses in leadership in law firms and leadership in corporate counsel, and where we cover everything from marketing to innovation to the structure of professional organizations to how law firms and corporate counsel are reacting to globalization. And the final piece that really makes all the other pieces work is that we are trying to build connections with practice and with lawyers and other professionals who are working in the legal services industry and are managing the changes that we seek to study. So we hope that through all three of these things that we will be able to really help the legal profession in this moment of transition where we are today.
That's fantastic. You know, I'm actually in my 50s, but I can tell you that you are so inspiring that if I was younger, I think I would want to come to law school and take your courses.
Well, thank you very much. And being in my 50s as well, I appreciate a fellow traveler. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, David. We sure appreciate your time.
Terrific.